This episode of Ticket Volume is brought to you by us, Invigate. Get service operations under control in no time. Get 1 free month of our software solution by going to try.invigate.com. Ticket Volume is proud to present 2 leaders in the Knowledge-Centered Support, or KCS, space. First, we have Liz Bunger, who's got her start in several leadership roles for Linehan Hallmark stores before spending almost 20 years in operations and service and support for Paychex, where she spent 11 of those 20 years building knowledge processes, building knowledge teams, projects, and programs before moving to Motive, where she currently serves as the KCS Program Manager, building a knowledge culture. And she's joined by Michelle Stumpf, who's held multiple roles at Capgemini, Ernst & Young as a knowledge architect, learning expert, and research specialist. She has also worked in similar roles at Verizon as content knowledge information architect, at RightAnswers as the KCS, or knowledge management practice director, for 7 years before moving on to serve as the head of knowledge management for Celonis. Welcome to Ticket Volume Live, an opportunity to be the news and information for improving IT experiences. I'm your host, Matt Barron. Each week, I hype up leaders to share their insights on service management, technology, and business. And this episode is going to bring that same thunder. I hope you've had a great week. And I also hope that you'll get involved today by asking a question in chat or providing your insights in chat as we're speaking. But for now, let's begin. Welcome to Ticket Volume, Liz and Michelle.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here.
My pleasure. Yes, thanks for being on. I'm super pumped for this episode because it's a topic that, you know, it's so centered on service and support. What would we do without knowledge, right? So I want to get started right away and just kind of talk about KCS, knowledge-centered support. What is it, and what's the difference between KCS and knowledge management?
Liz, did you want to go first on that one?
Sure. Great. Yeah. So KCS, Knowledge-Centered Service, is really all about getting everybody involved in knowledge management. That the people that are taking the calls from your customers are typically the people that have the most knowledge. So why not capture the knowledge that they have and that they're already sharing with customers? The big difference between KCS and a typical knowledge engineering approach is, in more of a knowledge engineering approach, you have a team of content writers or technical writers that are creating all of the content that gets shared internally or with customers, which can be beneficial, except you miss all of what the customers are actually asking about. So with KCS, you actually get to capture, why did the customer call? What did we tell the customer? What did we learn from them? And now it can actually help prevent the customers from having to make that phone call or chat, however you're getting your interactions next time, because the questions they're actually asking exist in your knowledge base.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, instead of knowledge living in its own silo, like, let's remember, hey, this is actually part of support. It should be a full loop. Michelle, what did you have to add to that?
Exactly. And the way that I love to look at it and describe it is KCS is more collaborative when it comes to knowledge, right? And touching upon what Liz just said about the knowledge engineers and the whole process involved leaves out an entire organization. And we've hired so many smart people from so many different areas of an organization, whether it's product, engineering, development, customer support, IT, wherever you may be doing knowledge. You know, we're really leaving all of that great knowledge and experience out when we restrict the knowledge creation and the management process to just a select few. So, you know, the way I like to describe it more of it's that just-in-time collaborative knowledge that, you know, we all move forward together, and it just breaks down a lot of those barriers, a lot of the problems that, you know, exist in terms of how long it takes us to get content created, right? It's all about the now. Things move so fast. If we are not capturing and modifying our processes to move along with it, you know, how would we ever keep up with that mountain of knowledge behind us, right? We create the knowledge and then people are like, okay, I created it, that's it, it's done. I'm going to throw it over the wall and then I can walk away. Like, but wait a second, things move so fast that knowledge will be outdated in such a short period of time. So it's really like how I like to describe it as more of like everybody has a role, everybody participates, and what everybody brings to the table is relevant. So whether it's that customer context that they're bringing, and that's all that they have to bring because they don't know, they've never experienced this before, right? That's okay, right? They've still brought the customer context. They kick things off for everybody to really chime in and collaborate with.
Okay. I love this. I love this already. I work in experience management. I'm always thinking about customer experience and employee experience. And one of the concepts is this voice of the customer function that has to happen. And it's kind of the same deal where the voice of the customer can't live in a silo. Like that can't just be something where you go out and do it and then echo back to the teams. Those teams need to hear the voice of the customer. They need to be connected. And it's the same thing that you're describing here. If we're not all doing it, then we're not all doing it.
Well, that's exactly it. But you bring up another point, the voice of the customer. Why is it that in, so many knowledge environments, we forget that completely? And now we have rephrased everything. We have made our content more technical. And now we've made it quite impossible for them to be able to find because they don't become technical in the moment of use, right? They're describing a problem or an issue or a question. They're using their words. And we've walked away from using a customer's context and the voice of the customer, right, with how we've written the content. So, that's a big piece of what makes KCS successful, because we keep getting that, that reuse of that content. And when internally our teams see, wow, my stuff is actually being used, it drives them to contribute and collaborate even more because they feel like they've actually got some benefit from what they actually participated in.
Okay. This is pure gold. This is pure gold. So let's start right at the beginning, because I think a lot of us understand the value of knowledge-centered support and want to get KCS and want to get knowledge management more, our teams to focus on it and spend more time on it. How do you guys sell it within your organizations? How do you get people on board and take action and get involved with this?
You want to go first, Liz? Or you want me to jump
Sure.
in?
Well, I'll go first. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, and I'll tell you, this is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to KCS, is getting people to buy into it. Because many times when you start talking about rolling out a knowledge management program, a KCS program, and what a lot of people hear is, great, one more thing for me to do. And they're thinking, I don't have time to do one more thing. It's all about what's in it for me. And the what's in it for me is very different for your agents than it is for the managers, than it is for the directors and the CIO and so on and so forth. So you really need to be able to tailor your messaging to what's the benefit to whatever audience you're talking to. So thinking about it from, let's say, like a service desk perspective, you've got people that are spending time, they have to go ask somebody else questions, or they're the person who's getting asked questions all day long. That's one of my favorite, is the people that know all the answers and they tend to complain that they're being interrupted all day long. So great. Okay. For you, right away, you're going to get value by adding information into KCS, because now you're not going to be interrupted all day. Every time somebody asks you a question, it goes in the knowledge base. Next time they ask you a question, you send them the knowledge article. At some point, they're going to stop asking you because they know they can find it themselves. So I think that's really the biggest thing, is tailoring your messaging. And one of the great things with KCS too is the coaching program. So this whole idea of peer-to-peer coaching, and one of the reasons it's peer-to-peer coaching is because your peers typically know what motivates you more than your managers. Sorry to tell you that, managers, but the peers know more because you're more honest with your peers than you are with your managers. So the coach can tailor their messaging to the coworker that they know, whatever it is that gets them out of bed every day coming to work. And they can help get that buy-in more. Okay.
Michelle, did you have something to add there?
Absolutely. And one of my rules, like my internal rule to be guided by here, is to lead with transparency, right? To describe the process from end to end, from whether it's, we're talking about a KCS candidate just getting started, through a knowledge domain engineer who's really that expert who's going in and doing the analysis and update, right? Regardless of who they are and what role they hold, the transparency is really key, right? Starting with what Liz mentioned, talk about the benefits and the what's in it for me. And they quickly see the what's in it for me when, not only are they able to see their knowledge being reused by others and other people are contributing, so they continue to learn about those particular topics they personally worked on, but then also, they are able to see the bigger picture as well in terms of the elimination of duplicate issues or questions coming in. They can learn in different areas. So, I feel like that on top of, just complete transparency in terms of the who does what the expectations are, and not making anything, I keep it light when it comes to KCS and creating the knowledge, right? We start to get into these areas with knowledge where things get so heavy, so cumbersome, we get really weighed down. And when you think about it, all of the technical knowledge that our teams have, the skills they have, to deal with customers or other employees, on top of the technical skills that they have to have. And now we're going to add another set, right? Of, should I say this? Should I be afraid to say this? Can I write this? Is this okay? Try to keep it as light as possible, with being fully transparent, share all of the wins and the successes with everyone, make everybody, and this touches upon the coaching piece too. Liz mentioned making everybody feel good about their contributions keeps people wanting to contribute and keep moving forward. If I had someone and to touch on Liz's part with manager versus coach, peer versus manager, right? I have found peers are less inclined to say, make a big deal about a typo, for example, or incorrect grammar. Whereas managers, it's like, okay, we're looking for that perfection with how this is actually created. So, what does that do when somebody points out the typos, right? Sometimes there's a way that we have to do it when somebody is not the best speller in the world. We can, we can work around that, but it's not the focus. The focus is the great article I created. Don't make the focus on the typo. It's just jump into the article, fix the typo and be done with it. So, that's really, that's my thing, is keeping it light, keeping it positive, and making people, acknowledging all of their contributions, make people want to be a part of this program, not make them want to run away screaming, right? That's the whole part of it.
Yeah, I love it already. It's so refreshing. Liz, your comment about co-writing or pairing up together reminds me of pair programming. And Michelle, you back that up. Like, of course, we're not going to point out the typos. We're going to support each other. It gives me so much hope, because so often it's a really difficult challenge in knowledge management. People want stuff to be perfect when really it doesn't necessarily need to be perfect. We've got a ton of great comments coming in on the chat stream. People are loving Michelle's background because she's a nerd just like the rest of us. Also, Brandon Ellis pointed out, this is why journey mapping is so important. You understand that it's not necessary to have everything be perfect. Sometimes just-in-time knowledge, just good enough knowledge is enough. And we got a great question here already about how AI is impacting knowledge overall. Is there an opportunity to automate some of these mundane actions so that people can spend their time and focus with customer service and messaging with the customer? What do you two see in this space? Michelle, let's start with you this time. What do you think of AI? How's it going to impact?
So yeah, at first, taking a look at it when everybody was jumping on the bandwagon, it was a shiny new new toy, right? Looking at it saying, okay, everybody focused on a singular use case of how do we just feed it everything we've got and open this up for customers. And those of us in the knowledge area are probably running, screaming, saying no and not ready, right? But there are so many other use cases, and many that different members of my team have already started to utilize, when not just creating the knowledge, but responding to customers, taking something that's very technical and using AI to say, hey, can you write this, in more of customer friendly language, and then having something that they did not have to spend any amount of time to really recreate, more of just doing that proofreading. So, there's several examples like that. We've actually taken some technical documentation and put it in and said, please write this an article, framing X, Y, and Z, or have this be the question that we're looking to answer, and then making sure that we get that out there. We just need that level of review so that we can ensure that it has not made up incorrect information like we've seen a lot of.
So writing is an obvious advantage. So Liz, what can you add to that one?
Yeah, and I would have been shocked if somebody hadn't asked about AI today, because especially in the knowledge industry, it's huge right now because everybody wants to put AI in place and just have it answer all the questions. But we know that it has hallucinations. So I agree. I think the idea of generating content through AI, I think is amazing. But I think it still needs a human being to review it and make sure that we're not giving flat out wrong answers. So it needs that additional piece of review. I think the other places that AI can help out with, especially when it comes to KCS, is maybe even just some of the content checks. So our coaches do content standard reviews, and AI can help automate some of those pieces that is looking for specific things. You can train a tool to look for specific things, and just some of those tasks that need to happen can be a little bit less manual, and then they can spend more time focused on the more value add where you really need a person to get involved.
Okay, that makes sense. Liz, you turned into a robot there for a little bit. So if you want to just mute your microphone and unmute, you might come back just fine on the next question. We've got a great observation here from Brandon. You guys were talking about how to win over stakeholders and executives. Yes, you should think of it like a marketing campaign and get people to buy in on what's in it for me and why I should do it. We also have another great question from Mr. Ellis. How long did it take before the KCS process was running on its own after the introduction of it? So what can people expect as far as timing goes, and like how long until it's in place? Liz, I'll have you go first.
Perfect, because the first thing I want to say is KCS is never running on its own. So let's lead with that. It's never going to be running on its own. I think in terms of getting the program up, running, and launched, it's very much going to depend on the size of your organization. So the organization I'm in right now, we have about 350 customer service reps, and we have been rolling out for just over a year because we're doing a waved approach, which is what's recommended through KCS. And we expect to finish our rollout by the end of this year. That means everybody will be trained. It will become business as usual, but we will continue to have a lot of involvement from certainly myself as the KCS Program Manager. We need to continue to make sure that our coaches are engaged. If you think it's going to run on its own, I'll tell you, it probably is going to die on its own because it needs care and feeding. It will always need care and feeding because it's a culture.
Yeah.
And, if you're not feeding that culture, then it just tends to, it's great for a little while. And then people leave in the organization. And I've seen this happen as people turn over, they take the culture with them. And unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily stick with the organization.
But Liz, it's so much easier if we can just, rule from the top and tell people what to do. It takes so much trust to build a program that runs on its own. Michelle, what would you add to that?
I think there's a lot of variables that are in play as well. So, for example, are we going to do KCS with the existing tools that we have in our environment, and are they KCS, I would say, compatible, right? Is there a way that you can utilize, right? So, where I currently am, it's been an 18-month journey to get to the point where, we've tried to use the tools that were already in place, have determined that it was really very, very cumbersome. A lot of things that made it flat out impossible to do KCS. So, step one for us is first of all, how do we implement the right tools so that we can get people really participating in a meaningful way and not having it truly be that aftersight, right? Because KCS is all about in the moment, in the workflow. It's really hard when your tools are anything but that. They do not support that. So, first and foremost, that you can include in your time and, your whole plan on moving forward. But, once that's gotten forward, what I've typically seen, and it does depend on the size of the organization, right? And how you break down your groups. I've seen teams roll out across a couple of weeks to go from, the first team being trained and up and running on a new workflow and doing those, in 3 or 4 groups across 1 week, where it's just a lot. It's not typically, the speed in which I like to progress, right? What I typically like to do is get everybody up and running on what KCS is, have them really understand what they're doing and what their role is going to be, train them on the tool, the new workflow, and then really do a little bit of ad hoc coaching, if you will, to kind of get that familiarity with, the new workflow, get some new muscle memory put into place, and then continue rolling on through different groups in the organization. And it's definitely going to depend on how many different geographical locations you have. If people are working, are we back to working in offices? Are people working at home? What time zones are people across? What time can we, jump in and work on, from a training perspective? But just continue to move and onboard groups. So I've seen everything range from, a matter of weeks to a matter of months. And it does depend on a whole bunch of different variables.
Okay. Fantastic. This is such a good episode already. We've got some comments coming in from people that are validating. Here's Sandy coming in saying that AI will take their KCS knowledge and then reword it to make it sound like it's human. A great usage of the writing tools of those large language models. Leslie pointing out it's very much like marketing. Of course, it's like a grassroots effort, trying to get that executive buy-in, getting people to understand what's in it for them. And some tactical questions here. How do you respond to users who spread the attitude that it's not their job to read and follow documentation? I would love to get y'all's opinions on this. Liz, what would you say? How do you win people over?
Well, it's funny. In terms of winning people over, to Leslie's comment, whenever people ask me about my job, I tell them I think most of my job is actually sales. That's what I'm trying to do, is sell people on what KCS is and why it's important to them and why they should do it. I can't be successful in my job if nobody buys what I'm selling. When it comes to getting people to read and follow documentation, number one, I think there's a difference with knowledge and with documentation. Nobody wants to read SOPs. I'm really sorry to those of you creating SOPs. We don't want to read them. Knowledge should be quick question and answer. Somebody asked a question, here's the answer, and it should be very easy to consume. Now, I understand when you get into some of these more technical things, there's a lot of steps. It should still be easy to consume. If people don't pick up technical manuals and read them. Okay, I shouldn't say that. I'm sure there are people who do that. But when they're on a call with a customer, they certainly are not doing that. They can't go back to their training. They don't have time to read a full SOP. So I think that's really the biggest thing, is make it consumable. Don't try and make it full documentation. Make it bite-sized. What was the question? This is the answer.
And Michelle, what would you add for people that don't want to participate? How do you think that you can win them over?
Yeah, one is I try to really, have more of a deeper conversation and understand the reasons as to why that might be, because there could be a lot of different reasons actually driving that. One I've heard, very often, especially one Liz just mentioned, right? Having documentation that's way too cumbersome, things that they had to drill through multiple sources to even find in the first place. I found that different people will give different levels of effort to finding information than others, of course, right? Some will do your basic, high level search and determine it's not there. They can't do it. They're ready to escalate, right? Whereas other people will, you have two ends of the spectrum. Other people will search because that's now their goal, is finding the information that they're looking for, right? So, I try to really get to understand, where's the pushback coming from? A lot of times, I've gotten to the point where I've got, my knowledge is my knowledge. And I spent a lot of time, energy, dedication to really learning about, whatever the topic is. And why should I share or just give all of that away to someone else? And, just having that conversation and pulling them back into it and having them look at it from another perspective. Like, this is not knowledge that you necessarily need to hold on to, because first of all, things are changing so rapidly. I work for a software company, right? How many releases do we have per year? How many new features, new functionalities, right? What they think is solid and knowledge that's going to last them forever has a time limit to it, right? Especially other people are learning and growing at the same rate. So, I kind of ask them to turn around and look at it is if they are doing themselves a disservice, because if they feel that they have so much to hide and therefore not share with others, if others are doing the same thing, how are they learning from them? This is all about all of us learning and growing together, and all of us moving up and just continuing to expand, what our capabilities are. And, when they stop to think about it, that, at that point they realize, what, I think I may be losing more than I'm gaining by, keeping all of this and not really looking to participate. Other fears that I've heard, it comes down to fears in some cases where it's like, I'm afraid of being judged about how I write, what I've written, or being exposed where people thought I knew something that perhaps I didn't know. So, they're diving in a level deep that they may not need to look at. If we're looking at knowledge, who's sitting there looking at saying, well, so-and-so wrote this article. Why didn't they know X, Y, or Z? We're not looking at it from that perspective. We're looking at, okay, put in what you know in the moment in that workflow and let it go, right? Let it go out there, let it grow. Let's collaborate on this. We're not looking at those nitty gritty details of, well, you should have added this or should have, how would I even know what that person knows or doesn't know? We're not looking at that level of deep. So
yes. Oh my gosh, that's so good. The ephemeral nature of knowledge, it's not going to last forever. And capture it now, use it now, because it's not going to be there forever. I just love that point. We've got some more great comments coming in. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Keep it short and simple, creating short videos and how-tos. I've always found that when knowledge is formatted in storytelling format, even if it's technical, is going to sit better with the audience. Some great tips. Obviously, people tuning in love knowledge. And if you're tuning in today, I want to point out that on December 7th, we've got another one of these live sessions coming up. We're going to be talking about the future of ITSM. So make sure that you register at invigate.com/ticket volume right down here. and then you'll get an invite and some links to register. We make it easy for you. So make sure that you register. I also like this point to ask for help from the marketing team with that storytelling approach. That can be a great way, right? It's broader. Everyone does it, so we should all be doing it. I've got another great question for you all, because when we met and talked about this, I was wrong on something in KCS. And I've trained people in knowledge management before how to write great knowledge articles. And one of the things that we spoke about was how to write with a unified voice so that all your knowledge articles sound the same. And Liz, what did you say? How did you put me in my place?
It really is. We don't want people to be technical writers, because then they lose a lot of the customer voice. So that's really the biggest thing, because that's one of the biggest objections too to KCS is, I'm not a technical writer. And that unified voice, if we're all using the customer context, that's your unified voice, is we're all thinking about it from a customer perspective. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. I think the biggest thing is really keep it simple. Use templates. So it's really plug and play. Here's the issue, here's the cause, here's the resolution. And that's where you get that unified voice, is by having consistent templates. And then your people, they don't have to be technical writers. That's not what we hired them to do. We hired them to do customer service, IT support desk, whatever it is. Let them do that and keep the knowledge articles simple enough that anybody can fill them in just based on what they're already telling the customers.
Yes, and that's echoed by Simone Jo Moore here. She said, so many people forget they're already doing knowledge activities. You're just doing it better with KCS. Michelle, what's another process tip that you would say like differs between KCS and knowledge management? Something we need to unlearn to do KCS better?
That not everything needs someone else to review it and approve it before it's published. So, and this is always my go-to argument. So if I have the knowledge and the expertise, I worked with the customer, I solved the issue, I documented the issue. Someone that wasn't in the moment, wasn't dealing with the customer, now has to review this because they're in a different role or at a different level from myself. So, that's one of those barriers to kind of break down and explain that we have this self-evolving process, if you will, where the content is always reviewed, right? When you think about it, if our team is reusing all this content, every single reuse is a review. We are validating that content. We are fixing what's not correct. We are adding what is missing. So why do we then need to put this heavy, cumbersome process of approval and send it to an outside pair of eyes to take a look at something? So, from the process perspective, it's all about, if it's all about truly about case deflection, if it's truly about enabling our customers and enabling our teams, let's get it out there as quickly as possible. Things do not move like they did in the past, right? Things are very, very fast.
Fist bump to just-in-time knowledge. I love that one. That's such a good one.
I'm going to add one little point to what Michelle said too, because one of the other things that I tell people who want that review, we can't trust them to put it in writing in the knowledge base. Who's reviewing the answer before they give it to the customer? No one. Absolutely no one reviews it. Like, you don't make your agents turn around and say, this is what I'm about to say to the customer. Is that okay? No, I'd rather have them put it in writing. So that way, if they are giving bad information, now at least we know they're giving bad information because they wrote it down somewhere. I don't know of any place that reviews 100% of their calls. If you do, more power to you. That's the QA team we have. So this way you can get that kind of extra. We can see what they're telling people because they put it in writing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really good. Okay, so I also have to point out, this is such a good episode, and all of our episodes are pretty good. If you'd like them, subscribe. Please subscribe. We also have a survey running now where we're giving away an Apple Watch because we want to improve. So that survey is going to help us improve. We've also got another great question from our audience, Mr. Justin Kelly. Hi, Liz and Michelle. I'm sure you're going to answer this, but what are some of the most important metrics or KPIs for measuring success in a KCS program? As we know, measurement is hard, and everyone wants to measure success to prove and convince people to reinvest in it more. Where would you suggest that people get started, Michelle?
So, besides our typical reuse metrics, right, of the knowledge, because that's an easy one, I like to look at the participation level of who is participating and at what level. Are we getting meaningful participation across the teams? Because ultimately, that's really where we're capturing all of that value and enabling that for our customers. I can look at case deflection. I can look at the reuse of all of the articles, of course, right? Very important metrics, as we all know. But I really want to know that everyone is participating in a meaningful way. I want to know that people are advancing in their KCS roles, right? They've achieved what they're looking to get. A lot of people have turned around and said, my goal is to be a publisher. Is that really possible here? That's something that I look at as a level of success too. How many, publishers do I actually have on the team? It ties directly to the speed of knowledge, right? And getting that knowledge out there. So those are a couple of my favorites to look at.
Okay. And Liz, what would you say as far as metrics or KPIs? What would you suggest?
Well, I think I'll tell you, we're looking at pretty much everything. And I think there's a difference between what you look at and what you share. KCS activities are very easy to measure. How many articles did we create? How often did we link articles? All those things. We look at those. I don't necessarily share them with everyone because we don't want to drive those activities. I'm also looking a lot at the impact. So what's the impact to our everyday stats that we're using? What's the impact to our CSAT? What's the impact to our first contact resolution? What's the impact to our, I'm going to say average handle time, but I'll tell you, short term, it will get better. Long term, it will get worse. So that's something you just need to keep in mind, is what's the impact now, and know that the impact on those things might change as you roll out more, because I think that's the purpose of KCS. We want to have a positive impact on the organization.
Yeah, I'm imagining this world where you can see on the knowledge article the actual business revenue it has saved or built as a result of it being published. Can you even imagine? That would be insane. And speaking of, we've got a ton of attendees today. So if you've got a question or a comment, drop it in chat. We would love to ask your questions because this is all for you. We're not doing this to just hear ourselves talk. I also really like some of the comments here that we've got. Patty Blackstaff pointed out, if the end of your experience ends with, I want to speak to a human, you're not helping your users. Such a good point. Don't just put your chatbot out there to echo things that you've already got out there. And then I also like Smojo's comment here that knowledge management's not about technology. The tech is the enabler. And if it doesn't flow at the speed of conversation, it becomes frustrating for sure. So I've got a couple more questions here. I really want to, I love that you already talked about knowledge hoarding and kind of, overwrote what knowledge hoarding would, that it's sort of irrelevant now. There's no reason to hang on to knowledge because there's no reason for the company to hang on to you, or that the fact that the knowledge is going to be changing over time. When someone is really interested in starting with KCS, they want to like understand it fully before they start on a program. Where would you suggest people go to learn and like get started? What are some of the foundational training or literature or people to connect with to really understand what KCS is? And we'll start with you, Michelle.
So I typically will have the conversation where, we talked about KCS being sales, right? So selling, typically all of the KCS benefits, but making it personal to the organization, because that's really where you make the biggest impact, right? But we can talk about, all the organizations out there, have done KCS and what they've reported that they've seen, and that's all well and good, right? But, really making it personal, tying in our metrics and saying, this is where we are today, this is where KCS can get us tomorrow, starts to really get them to kind of really be involved with the conversation, and then dive into and here's how we're going to do it and why, right? And part of that is just really having a basics KCS fundamentals, whether it's a conversation, a workshop, a class, right? I used to deliver those on a daily basis, it seemed, right, in a previous life. And that was, that really made the biggest impact, right? Just getting that basic information before being overwhelmed with all of the nitty-gritty details, right? Those are more for practitioners who are going to dive in and really roll this out. I would recommend something that's more of a 1 or 2 day or even 3 day type of certification class. But I would start off with something very, very light, like the basics. Let that digest for a while. Understand, the basics, the benefits, what it really is. What are we talking? Like, what does solve and evolve loop? What do those things even mean, right? Address some of the questions that may come up as not questions, but more of the roadblocks they start to put in the way. What do you mean everybody's going to be able to publish? Like talking about, what the roles are and how people progress their roles. Things like that kind of open up the doors versus start to close those doors that you then have to, always thinking strategically when it comes to that, right? Just really thinking, how do I get them on board? How do I get them along the same, vision, the path that I want them to be on, and kind of getting rid of the questions before there are questions.
That's a good one. I love that you just casually drop, solve, and evolve. Like, hey, this isn't a process. This is a method. This is a philosophy. It's a change from process thinking to value stream, to value delivery. Liz, where would you suggest that people go to learn and like explore KCS, get started, and get those foundational elements?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great places. The biggest place I would recommend to anybody is the Consortium for Service Innovation, which is the organization that really came up with KCS, serviceinnovation.org. They have a KCS practices guide, which I consider my KCS Bible. If I have a question, what should I be doing? What should I not be doing? It's in the practices guide. Now, I'll tell you, to sit down and read the practices guide, that's a commitment. It's worth it to get through it. Anytime I have done something that the practices guide said don't do, or didn't do something that the practices guide said do, they were right. That's where my KCS program has always gone off the rails a little bit, is when I didn't follow what was already suggested. These are companies that have already tested this. They've learned from each other. They're basically telling you, they're giving you the roadmap of this is what worked for us. Not just one company, multiple companies. This is what worked for us. So there's a lot of great resources out there. That's absolutely my first place to go and get involved. There's LinkedIn groups that you can get involved in. One of the things that I love best about the KCS community is everybody's willing to share. It's all about learning from each other. KCS is all about reuse, and we do the same thing as KCS practitioners. Is, if I have a question on how to do something, I might reach out to Michelle and say, hey, what did you do in this scenario? Tell me what worked and what didn't work. All about getting involved. So I think the more you can get involved in this community, the more successful you'll be.
Yes, someone put it in chat. I don't have it there anymore, but someone said sharing is caring. And of course, we have to eat our own dog food, but I really prefer the phrase, let's drink our own champagne instead. So this has been an absolutely phenomenal episode. We just published next month's live episode, The Future of ITSM. We'll be speaking with Mark Smalley, Clara Agatar, and I forget the third person at the moment. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry to the third person, whoever that is. But I definitely want to make sure that you register for that event because it's one of the best. And I'm just going to check here real quick and see if there are more questions. Here we've got one from Levente. I'm interested to hear about how do you involve and engage senior leadership in KCS? What is your Jolly Joker hint for them?
Well, that's a name I'm familiar with. Hi, Levi. So how do we engage senior leadership? What we've currently been doing is, really looking at how we drive the customer support organization forward, right? And knowledge being at the center of that, and how we improve all of the metrics that they're currently focused on, right? So first and foremost, what is it that you have on your plate? If we're talking about, going directly up the chain above us, what's important to them? What are they looking to solve for? And then tying knowledge into that. How does knowledge help us actually achieve those goals, right? Customer satisfaction is always the hot topic. How do we drive higher level of customer satisfaction? Well, for one, enabling customers to self-serve is one area, but if they self-serve, then those don't really impact our internal support customer stats, right? So how about, quicker, easier resolutions, more knowledgeable team, things like that, so that's really what we look to do is drive with, how we can, improve those metrics. Also, how we improve the skills of the team that we have. How do we decrease the amount of people that we're currently needing to hire because, we're successful, right? And we're adding customers right and left, but how do we support that ongoing, increase in the demand? So, all of those areas, and I don't want to take them all. I'll let Liz chime in here as well, but, just a starting place for me.
The reason I flipped the screens is because I think that goes for all leadership, really. Look at their goals, look what they're trying to accomplish, and then align to that because people are, number one, coin operated, a lot of cases, right? My bonuses are focused on this. But I also wanted to point out, Rob England was the third person at next week's webinar that I totally forgot. And we've got another great question because I think you handled that one really well. We'll just move on to the next one. Quinn asks, what's the biggest change you've seen in KCS throughout your careers? And what are you most excited about that is to come? So what changes have you seen recently? And then what do you think is that's gonna come about? Liz, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes I have seen with KCS is the move away from it being IT support desk. It's not just something that you can do on your IT support desk. It really is something that can benefit for the whole company. And I'll tell you, that's the way I approach any KCS program now is, okay, you hired me to come into this small part of the organization and we're going to roll out KCS. Great. I'm totally on board with that. But I'm going to assume from day one that eventually this is going to be a company-wide thing, that the whole company is going to see, because I saw that in my last job, we started out just in our little IT service desk with about 150 people. And when I left, we'd rolled that out to over 8,000 people. Exactly. That also meant we had to rework some things. So that's why now I always go into it assuming we're going to take over the whole company with KCS. And I think that it's just, in terms of what's to come, I think it's just going to expand to more and more teams. Certainly customer service, that's easy. Any customer service part of your organization, HR, marketing, your legal teams, everybody can get involved in KCS. And I think that we're going to see a lot more of that.
I love that. That's such a good answer. I think even HDI's Innovation of the Year award winner last year was doing that. They were applying knowledge management across the entire enterprise at a huge financial firm. Speaking of HDI, Brandon Ellis also points out that HDI has a KCS Foundations course. That's a great place to start as well. Michelle, what would you add? What's something that's changed in KCS in your past or something that's innovating that you think is coming?
What I've personally seen is there's less pushback than there has been previously, where I will tell you it in the past, it was literally every executive team I met with, I had to break down the whole trust element. Why don't you, and this touches upon Liz's point from before, why do you not trust the same people you trust to answer the phones and respond to your customers directly? Why do you not trust them to write things down? I don't have that conversation nearly as much as I used to have, which is great. That really, it shows that we're moving. But yeah, I've also seen the same thing that Liz mentioned. I mean, KCS changed their name as a result of organizations, stepping outside of the support organization, rolling it, across their entire organization. And, already, here in my role, I see where we're touching upon areas outside of customer support. And, the great thing that I see now is willingness to participate. That's another thing where, in the past, it's been I've dealt with I don't have time for this. This is going to add way too much to my work day. I do still see that to some degree, but not nearly as much as I used to. So, it's coming out with that value of what this can do. People, I think, have become more value focused in the value they're providing to the organization. And they want people to see what they know and what they've contributed. And they see knowledge as a way for them to kind of highlight all of those things. So
I love it.
I'm sure where that came from too.
No, that's great. That's totally great. And it's I love that you pointed out that KCS changed their name, because I have always called it knowledge-centered support, but now I'm understanding why I hear knowledge-centered service so often now. I didn't realize that it even changed. They didn't do enough marketing for that. And Simone's got another point here that we need to bust that myth that many times it's not purely front-end knowledge base and service desk only job, right? That's something that you just mentioned, basically, Liz, right? And Brandon's got a great point here on one of the metrics, that ticket deflection metrics help drive the concept of shift left. And I've definitely seen this in tooling come to bear now. I mean, more often now we're starting to see that as part of the ticket flow. Did this solve your problem and avoid a ticket, especially when it comes to self-service, because self-service portals have gotten a lot better over the years. Okay, so we have reached the end of our time today. It has been such a great episode. I want to thank you both for being here, and I want to give you an opportunity. So, Michelle, how can people connect with you and learn more?
So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I think you've got my details there. So happy to connect anytime. Also happy to chat anytime. So, if there's anything regarding KCS, any internal arguments that I'm always brought in as the moderator, the voice of KCS reason. I am certainly happy to engage in those conversations. Please certainly let me know. Spent a lot of time as a KCS certified trainer, just working across multiple companies and training their teams and helping them roll out KCS end to end. So certainly happy to talk to anybody. I always say my door is always open. It's true. Always call, send a LinkedIn invite, or just set up a call. I'm certainly happy to chat.
I love you dropping that New England accent. Just give me a call. And Liz, what about you? How can people connect with you and learn more?
Yeah, same thing. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn is probably the best place to connect. And just like Michelle, I think this is one of the things that you find with people in the KCS industry is we love to share what we've learned. I don't think that I have it all down pat, but I am happy to tell you what I've done wrong and tell you what I've done right and see what we can, and learn from you also. It's kind of the area we're always learning on. So absolutely connect with me on LinkedIn. I love it.
So that's what you got to do. If you want to geek out about KCS and knowledge management, you've got to reach out to one of these two and connect. I want to thank you both for being here, and thanks to the entire audience, because it has been great to have you on. You've had great questions and great comments. And don't forget to register for next month's live session. We're going to be talking about the future of ITSM with Rob England, Mark Smalley, and Claire Agatar. It should be another great session. And to our guest today, what are you looking for? We've got lots of ideas, but we need your input. Please register at invigate.com/ticket volume so that we can send you a survey and get your feedback. You might even win an Apple Watch. And speaking of ticket volume, did you know that this podcast is brought to you by Invigate? It's a fit-for-purpose service desk solution with integrated asset management designed to let you focus on supporting your organization without arduous implementations and year-long go-lives. In fact, service teams from Toyota, NASA, and McDonald's use Invigate to manage requests, automate workflows, and centralize inventory data so that they can focus on delivering better service, because good service is good business. We'll see you next month, everyone.